Since the 19th century, global nutrition levels have increased and malnutrition is waning. We have never had access to so many calories from so many different goods available to so many people at such low prices. The threat of famines has thus unsurprisingly faded. In the 1870s, some 142 people per 100,000 died due to famines. In the decade that just ended, that number stood at 0.5 per 100,000, a 99% reduction. Yet there is a paradox. It is in the period of rising nutritional levels that we observe the worst famines in human history. Prior to the 20th century, most famines caused by natural factors, like climate or disease, were not exactly extreme events when compared to the Holodomor in the Ukraine during the 1930s or the Great Famine in China during the 1950s and 60s. Pre-20th century famines were more like periods of dearth with severe malnutrition. The reason for this distinction is that famines and dearth caused by natural events have heavily waned. No market economy with a liberal democracy suffered through a famine during the 20th century. However, famines produced by human design increased considerably. The 10 worst famines of the 20th century could all be attributed directly or indirectly to government policies. And they are among the worst in all of humanity's history. These famines were never monocausal. There are always debates about these extreme famines. Were they started by a drought, by government policy? Were the famine deaths due to governments failing to provide relief? Disentangling these finer threads is a very daunting task. Recent work by Natalia Naumenko in the Journal of Economic History disentangles the case of the Holodomor in the Ukraine during the 1930s. The death toll of the Holodomor was horrific.
The leaders of the Soviet Union are trying to remake the world, and one of their central ideas is that they understand the future. The future legitimates what they do now. Certain people who are around now essentially have no purpose. And this idea is tested, I think, most dramatically in Ukraine. And Ukraine, because it's the most fertile territory of the Soviet Union, is where the hammer hits hardest.
6 to 8 million died in 1933. Many scholars debate whether the famine was precipitated by a drought and whether government policies made things worse, such as the collectivization of farms that had started in the 1920s and the banning of private food trading in order to facilitate procurement of wheat by the government for export. Naumenko collects district-level data about mortality, weather, collectivization, agricultural inputs, ethnic composition, and urbanization. Combined with other data sources, she first discredits the idea that droughts had taken place before 1933 in ways that made the local populations vulnerable. The temperatures in those years were roughly similar to previous years, even though the months of May and June 1932 were marked by unusually high levels of rainfall. However, the effects of collectivization and government procurements of wheat provide strong explanatory power. Between 52 and 57% of excess mortality is explained by variations in the rate of collectivization of the farm economy across districts. Naumenko then investigates the effect of collectivization on farm output. Unsurprisingly, areas with higher rates of collectivization exhibited smaller sown area per capita. Collectivization was also associated with a drop in livestock per capita. These two mechanisms suggest that there was clearly an institutional root to the famine. As Naumenko summarizes succinctly, it is necessary to put the blame where it belongs, at the feet of government policies that make the food supply susceptible to disaster when environmental conditions are less than perfect.
They passed passport laws that forbade Ukrainians peasantry to go into the cities, and eventually they blocked the entire republic, so people couldn't leave.
The Soviet secret police seal off Ukraine's borders. No one can get out or bring food in. A nation the size of France is strangled by hunger.
Stalin crushed the possibilities of Ukrainian autonomy, Ukrainian self-determination in some ways within the Soviet Union through the actions taken in Holodomor. This was an attack across the board. against Ukrainian nationality.
It broke the ability of the society to resist for decades to come.
This is a potent reminder of how governments can fuel some of the worst disasters in human history.
Таке було, що ми молодості не мали ніколи. Вся молодість пішла, бозна куди. І пережили все це те, що нам не треба було. А комуністична система зробила нас найгіршими рабами в світі. І ми залишилися винуваті. Не знати тільки за що, за які гріхи. Тільки того, що ми були, звалися українцями.